Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs just approved a wide-ranging cybersecurity bill that is raising concerns amongst critics who say it will give the president the authority to shut down parts of the internet during a cyber attack. Is this just another power grab by the government? Joining me, Wayne Cruz, Director of Technology Studies for the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Wayne, welcome here. What's the government of? This is almost unbelievable.
It's a pleasure.
If anything is free and unregulated and joyful, it's the internet, where you can say what you want, listen to what you want, watch what you want. And the government wants to shut it down?
Well, it fits with what you were talking about earlier. There's always this tendency to have government steer and make the market row, and that's what's going on here. When it comes to the internet, you got a couple of choices. There are risks we face, but you can either collectivize and centralize those risks, or you can look at the development of the market and look for what kind of market alternatives there are that are going to protect online safety. Remember, the companies that are vulnerable in the internet world and consumers that are vulnerable, none of this is happening in a vacuum. Companies are working very hard to deal with cybersecurity threats and things of that sort, and there have to be lots of market institutions that evolve to protect us in the future, whether it's cyber insurance or those sorts of things.
Okay, there are now market forces. There are mechanisms in place to shut down the internet privately if something assaultive or offensive to the internet, if a destruction of mainframes has happened, right?
Well, if need be, that's what they would do. But what's worrisome here is the claim that there could be a kill switch given to the president, any president, under this bill. And Lieberman and some of his staffers had said that's not really what's taking place. But Lieberman himself said China has the, and I think you played this clip, China has the authority or ability to disconnect
Senator Joseph
and we need
Lieberman.
that here.
Here's Senator Joe Lieberman, who's the independent Democrat from Connecticut, who has proposed this legislation. His argument is, you're not going to believe this, that President Obama needs the same power that the dictators in China have. Take a listen to this.
This is something that we need to protect our country. Right now, China, the government, can disconnect parts of its internet in the case of war. We need to have that here, too.
I'd want to jump over the table and grab him by the neck. How could he possibly say that in a free society our government should have the same powers as the dictators in China?
I'm here to tell you, Judge, that the kind of internet that evolves in the future in a world in which the president has this ability to operate a kill switch is very different from the better and safer one that's going to evolve otherwise. Because remember, companies building our internet infrastructure have got to deal with their upstream business suppliers, downstream business customers, consumers, Wall Street, the global markets. They have massive incentives to deal with cyber attacks. And I'm not saying that those don't exist. I think it's something we have to watch for and monitor all the time.
If the president were a crazy person, or if the president were the type of individual who wanted to silence his opponents and he had a kill switch, he could just throw the switch if he didn't like what people were saying about him.
He could do that, and in fact, CEI, my organization, signed on with a lot of other organizations about the potential civil liberty threats and free speech threats here. But it's just important to remember that there are lots of advances that are coming on the internet. The internet is still in its very early stages. 2010 is a primitive year for the internet compared to the kinds of technology.
I'll tell you something else that I worry about, Wayne. I'll tell you something else that I worry about, which is the impression that the government is protecting us or keeping us safe. I mean, the government does a terrible job at that, at least domestically. If people believe that, might they not take the right security measures themselves if they think the government is looking out for them?
Well, look at the government's own networks and lost laptops and things of that sort. And of course, you know, in the Homeland Security culture, government is known more for invading our privacy rather than help protect our privacy or our cybersecurity. But basically, in this question, you got a couple of choices. You can either improve the private sector's door locks and barbed wire and things of that sort, or we can centralize cybersecurity more. And I think centralizing it is a bad idea. This notion of business and government partnerships do have a role to play, but remember, security has got to be a competitive feature. It can't be one where everybody comes together and agrees, okay, we're going to adopt this particular security technology.
I just have about
we want all kinds of disarray and
I just have about half a minute left, Wayne. I want to ask you this. Is the mechanism there to give the president a big red switch to throw? Would it work if he threw the switch?
I don't put it that way. The way I put it is the president is granted emergency powers that could conceivably let him overrule what the private sector says. Now, Lieberman's claim is that the old Communications Act of '36 already allowed this, but that world had no internet. That was just a basic telecom world. And we need to deregulate and make sure that all of our critical networks, electricity, water, sewer, power, chemical transportation, all of these can work together and improve, and that's a competitive process.
Wayne Cruz, thanks very much. Studio audience, here's now a look at the never-before-seen discussion after the show.
So what do you suggest for public school teachers who really do, want students to know the truth?
What you do is you take biographical history. Take 2 or 3 or 4 really cool stories. They don't know the names of these people, and tell the stories. Because the way we used to teach American history, and I think we've really goofed it up today, we used to teach biographical history. So you wanted to learn the American Revolution, you read the life of George Washington and Benjamin Rush and all these guys. Today we do a bunch of dates, names, and places, and it doesn't have any meaning.
It has no meaning.
It has no meaning.
I ask my kids, what are you learning in school? What are you learning in school? And they tell me, and we got to history, and it was a horrible, they could barely remember any of it. And I said, well, that's because, no, they're not telling the story. Listen to this. Listen, this is what happened. And I would just tell them the story. Both of them went to college for history.
Yeah.
Both of them. It's the story that matters more.
Pull out the stories of some of those guys, go online, get documents for them, and you become the dispenser of the information.
We were just talking on a couple of shows ago about how there was an American Revolution at the dinner table as well. Because Dad, children and wives were also almost property. I mean, in some ways, they were property. So it really was a whole revolution, not just with that African Americans were property, but so were women and children, right?
The American Revolution broke a whole cultural thinking. And you'll find that at the start of the American Revolution, the American founders were releasing slaves like crazy because it just dawned on them. We talked about the guy in the front of the boat with Washington Cross in Delaware, Prince Whipple. Prince Whipple belonged to signer of the Declaration, William Whipple. William Whipple's taking his slave off to go fight with George Washington, and William Whipple looks at his slave and says, "Prince, I hope you'll fight really strong in the battle." And Prince looked back at him and said, "I'd fight a whole lot stronger if I was fighting for my own freedom." And the general said, "You're right," because George Washington owned 200 slaves. They were given him when he was 11 and 12 years old. He was raised that way. And when he realized what was happening fighting for freedom, that's where he started bringing black soldiers in the Revolution. He would not sell any slave, break any family, and that's why he freed all of his slaves. And in the South, you got the overt racism. In those middle states of Maryland and Delaware and Virginia, they said, "Man, it's an institution. It's wrong. How do we get rid of it?" And they're the guys who came up with the Colonization Society. These are the guys who said, we don't think we can do emancipation straight out. The culture's not ready for it, but we do think we can take all those who want to return back where they were stolen from and let them go back. Now, as you move to New England colonies, there's no thought of Colonization Society. We're all free and equal, and everybody's part of society, and we don't talk about whether we're white or black. And so those are the 3 approaches. And so you had full-out abolition up here. You had gradual emancipation down here, which was the Colonization Society, and you had no consideration of it in the South. And so those are the 3 approaches that you see in the founders as well.
Great stuff. This Friday, Glenn. So the Supreme Court today, once and for all, ruled that the Constitution means what it says. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why did it take us so long to get here? Well, we've had judges and legislators who want the government to have a monopoly on force. They don't trust you to protect yourself. They want to know that if they get overbearing, if they fail to protect us, or if they violate your fundamental rights, you will accept it like sheep. No more. After today, 230 years after the Second Amendment was adopted, the Supreme Court finally recognized that we all have a natural right to self-defense, and keeping and bearing arms is the way the Constitution says we exercise that right. From today forward, no politician, whether well-intended or tyrannical, can stop you from owning guns. Also today, a Senate panel voted to bring to the floor of the Senate a bill that would permit the president to shut down the Internet. Here we go again. The government hates and fears free speech, so it wants to shut it down. Write and email your members of Congress and argue to them that this authoritarian, unconstitutional measure should never see the light of day. The whole purpose of the First Amendment is to assure that you decide what to see and hear and read, and not the government. Jefferson said that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. Today we had a victory for the Second Amendment and a potential defeat for the First. Jefferson was right. From New York, defending freedom,